Few figures in modern American politics have been scrutinized as relentlessly as Donald Trump. For nearly a decade, journalists, historians, and political observers have analyzed his rhetoric, behavior, and public statements with unusual intensity. Yet even among longtime Trump watchers, there are moments that land differently, moments that feel less like political theater and more like something fundamentally unsettling. One of those moments unfolded this week. It began not with a policy announcement or a campaign rally, but with a shocking crime in Los Angeles. Rob Reiner, the award-winning actor and director known for films like All the President's Men and A Few Good Men, and his wife, Michelle Singer, were found murdered in their home. Authorities later indicted their son, Nick Reiner, on 2 counts of first-degree murder. The case immediately drew national attention, not only because of Reiner's fame, but because of the tragic and deeply personal nature of the crime. What followed next, however, pushed the story into far more disturbing territory. President Donald Trump, who has been criticized by Reiner for years, responded publicly on Truth Social. Instead of expressing condolences or remaining silent, Trump suggested that Reiner suffered from what he called Trump derangement syndrome and implied, without evidence, that this condition may have somehow contributed to Reiner's death. The reaction was swift. Critics across the political spectrum described the comment as cruel, unnecessary, and profoundly inappropriate. But for Michael Wolff, the veteran journalist who has chronicled Trump for decades, the moment signaled something far deeper. "This is not just bad judgment," Wolff said during a new episode of Inside Trump's Head, the podcast he co-hosts with Daily Beast editor Joanna Coles. "This is something else entirely." Wolff is not a casual observer. He has written 4 books focused on Trump, spending years inside Trump's orbit, speaking with aides, allies, and critics alike. Few journalists have documented Trump's inner circle more extensively, or more controversially. And according to Wolff, this moment crossed a line even by Trump's standards. "He just showed the world that he is genuinely off his rocker," Wolff said. A response that left many stunned. Trump's response to Reiner's death was not required. No one had demanded a comment. There was no political pressure to weigh in. Yet Trump chose to do so anyway, injecting himself into a tragedy in a way that immediately raised questions about judgment, impulse control, and emotional awareness. To Wolff, the issue was not simply tone. It was timing, intent, and consequence. "You fall asleep in public, okay, not a good look, but it's not really your fault," Wolff said, referencing recent viral moments where Trump appeared disengaged at public events. But this is something else. This was unnecessary. And it creates nothing except harm. Wolff framed the incident not as an isolated lapse, but as part of a broader pattern, one that he believes is accelerating rather than stabilizing. "As anyone who has gone through this knows," Wolff explained, "just because an older parent shows signs of losing it doesn't mean it stops. It often continues. And we have 3 years to go." That comparison, likening Trump's behavior to cognitive decline observed in aging family members, sparked intense discussion online. Supporters dismissed it as offensive speculation. Critics argued it captured something they have felt but struggled to articulate. What made the moment particularly striking was the absence of political upside. Trump gained nothing from the post. It did not energize his base. It did not shift a narrative in his favor. It did not distract from other controversies. If anything, it invited renewed scrutiny into Trump's mental state at a time when voters are already uneasy about leadership stability. A long history of personal attacks. To understand why this moment resonated so strongly, it helps to understand the history between Trump and Rob Reiner. Reiner has been one of Trump's most vocal Hollywood critics. Over the years, he has openly accused Trump of authoritarian tendencies, attacks on democratic norms, and corruption. Trump, in turn, has frequently lashed out at Reiner, mocking his appearance and dismissing him as irrelevant. But even in that context, responding to a violent death with personal insults marked a new escalation. Political analysts noted that Trump has often used tragedy as a backdrop for messaging, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes controversially, but rarely in a way that appeared so detached from basic human empathy. This wasn't politics, one media analyst observed. It was something much darker. The Wolf warning. Michael Wolff's warning carried weight precisely because he is no stranger to Trump's extremes. He has documented Trump's impulsiveness, paranoia, and obsession with loyalty for years. Yet Wolff suggested that this moment felt different in degree, not just kind. He didn't have to say anything, Wolff repeated. And yet he jumped in proactively, creating something that helps no one, including himself. That, according to Wolff, is the key signal. Political figures usually act with at least some awareness of consequences. When actions repeatedly defy self-interest, analysts begin to ask whether impulse has replaced calculation. And for a sitting president, or a political figure wielding immense influence, that question carries profound implications. As news of the post spread, it intersected with broader concerns already circulating among voters: Trump's age, his emotional volatility, and his increasingly erratic public messaging. Polling over recent months has shown growing unease among independents who once tolerated Trump's style but now question his steadiness. This incident, critics argue, may deepen those doubts. A story that is far from over. The investigation into the Reiner murders is ongoing, and authorities have stressed that there is no evidence connecting Trump's comments to the crime itself. But politically and culturally, the damage may already be done. What should have been a moment of restraint became a flashpoint, one that reignited debates about character, fitness, and the psychological demands of leadership at the highest level. And as Wolff warned, this may not be the end of it. We still have years ahead, he said. And if this is where we are now, the question is not whether it continues, but how far it goes. But the fallout from this moment is only beginning. As the shock from President Donald Trump's comments spread, political analysts began asking a more uncomfortable question: why would a president choose to speak this way at all? There was no political necessity, no legal obligation, and no strategic advantage to inserting himself into a personal tragedy involving the violent deaths of Rob Reiner and his wife. Yet Trump did so anyway, quickly, publicly, and without restraint. For longtime observers of Trump, this pattern is familiar, but the context is new. Trump has often attacked critics, mocked opponents, and dismissed dissenters. What unsettled even seasoned analysts this time was the absence of any clear motive beyond impulse. The target was no longer a rival politician or media outlet, but a deceased cultural figure whose family was still processing an unimaginable loss. Michael Wolff described this moment as a break from Trump's usual transactional instincts. Historically, Trump's controversies, however inflammatory, served a purpose: energizing supporters, shifting media attention, or punishing perceived enemies. In this case, there was no such payoff. This doesn't mobilize anyone, Wolff noted. It doesn't protect him. It doesn't distract. It only hurts. A shift in how the comments are received. Trump's supporters initially attempted to brush off the post as another example of his unfiltered style. Some suggested it was simply Trump lashing out at a longtime critic. Others argued that outrage over the comment was being exaggerated by the media. But behind the scenes, even some Republican strategists reportedly expressed concern. According to individuals familiar with internal discussions, the worry was not about backlash from Democrats, who have long criticized Trump, but about erosion among voters who previously accepted his abrasiveness as part of his brand. There is a difference, analysts argue, between political aggression and moral dissonance. The Reiner comment fell into the latter category. Voters can excuse harshness, one GOP consultant explained anonymously. They struggle with cruelty that feels random. Age, stress, and escalating pressure. The incident also reignited conversations about Trump's age and cognitive endurance. At 78, Trump is the oldest president to serve in office. While age alone is not determinative of leadership ability, the cumulative effects of stress, constant conflict, and public scrutiny are increasingly visible. Wolff's comparison to an aging parent was not accidental. He framed Trump's behavior as part of a gradual decline rather than a sudden collapse, an erosion marked by impulsivity, fixation, and diminishing self-restraint. Political psychologists note that leaders under prolonged stress can experience what they call disinhibition, a reduced ability to filter thoughts before expressing them. In Trump's case, critics argue, this trait has always existed, but is now intensifying. Recent months have seen a pattern of posts that appear reactive rather than strategic, attacks launched late at night, personal grievances aired without context, and statements that contradict official briefings from his own administration. The Reiner post, analysts suggest, fits squarely into this trajectory. The cost of unforced errors. In political terms, this was what strategists call an unforced error. No opponent baited Trump into responding. No journalist cornered him. No breaking development required comment. Trump volunteered the controversy. And once released, it could not be undone. Media coverage quickly shifted from the tragedy itself to the president's response. Headlines focused less on the investigation and more on Trump's language. Cable news panels debated not policy, but temperament. Social media amplified the comment far beyond Trump's immediate audience. Crucially, the moment reinforced existing narratives rather than creating new ones. For critics, it confirmed fears about Trump's emotional fitness. For undecided voters, it raised fresh doubts. For supporters, it forced another round of explanations. None of this advanced Trump's stated agenda. A president apart from his own moment. Another aspect that alarmed observers was Trump's apparent inability, or unwillingness, to read the national mood. Violent crime, mental health, and gun violence remain sensitive issues across the country. Public appetite for empathy and restraint is high during moments of tragedy. Instead, Trump responded with grievance and insult. This wasn't miscalculated, one former White House aide observed. It was misaligned. That misalignment, analysts argue, may reflect a deeper detachment. Trump increasingly appears to operate within a closed feedback loop, responding primarily to personal slights rather than broader public sentiment. As his circle narrows, critics suggest, so too does his perspective. Michael Wolff has long argued that Trump's governing style is rooted in personal loyalty and perceived betrayal rather than institutional norms. The Reiner post, in Wolff's view, was another example of Trump seeing the world through a purely personal lens, even when the moment demanded restraint. Legal and moral lines. While Trump's comment did not violate any laws, it raised ethical questions that legal scholars say are impossible to ignore. Implying a connection between political criticism and violent death, even rhetorically, risks normalizing dangerous associations. Several First Amendment experts emphasize that free speech protects Trump's right to speak, but does not shield him from consequences, political, moral, or reputational. This is not about censorship, one constitutional scholar explained. It's about responsibility. In the past, Trump has shown little concern for reputational fallout. But analysts warn that repeated incidents of this nature accumulate. Each controversy may fade, but together they form a pattern voters cannot unsee. The silence from allies. Notably, many of Trump's usual defenders remained quiet. There were no coordinated talking points. No full-throated defenses from senior allies. The silence itself became part of the story. That absence suggests, according to political insiders, a growing discomfort among those tasked with defending Trump publicly. When statements become indefensible, silence becomes the safest option. And that silence can be revealing. As the political fallout continued, attention shifted to a broader question. If this is how Trump responds to tragedy now, what does that mean for moments of true national crisis? That question, observers say, may linger far longer than the original post. And with years still ahead in the political cycle, the implications of this moment may only be starting to surface. As the immediate outrage over President Donald Trump's comments began to settle, a more enduring impact started to take shape. This was no longer just about a single Truth Social post or a fleeting controversy. For many political observers, the episode marked a moment when long-simmering concerns converged into a clearer, more troubling picture. The question quietly circulating in newsrooms, campaign offices, and even within parts of Trump's own political ecosystem was stark. What happens when unfiltered impulse becomes the defining feature of presidential behavior? A moment that reinforced existing fears. Public opinion experts note that moments like this rarely convert staunch supporters or opponents. Instead, they shape the views of those in the middle, the voters who are not ideologically anchored, but emotionally responsive. For this group, leadership is less about ideology and more about judgment. Polling analysts point out that voters often tolerate policy disagreements more easily than perceived instability. While Trump's base has historically embraced his confrontational style, swing voters have shown less patience when that style appears disconnected from empathy or basic restraint. The Reiner comment, critics argue, did not introduce a new concern, it reinforced an old one. It confirmed what people already suspected, said one veteran political strategist. That the filter is gone. The cumulative effect of small moments. One post alone does not define a presidency. But history shows that leadership reputations are often shaped by accumulation rather than singular events. Each moment becomes a data point. Each unforced error adds weight to a narrative already forming. Over time, analysts say, voters don't remember exact quotes, but they remember how a leader made them feel. Was the leader steady? Was the leader compassionate? Was the leader focused on the country rather than personal grievances? In this case, Trump's decision to personalize a tragedy raised doubts on all three fronts. Silent reaction from institutions. Perhaps more telling than public outrage was the response from institutions that typically provide guardrails. There were no urgent clarifications issued by the White House. No effort to contextualize the statement. No visible attempt to de-escalate. That silence has been interpreted in two ways. Some argue it reflects normalization, another controversial statement in an era saturated with them. Others suggest something more concerning, resignation. A sense that intervention is futile. When staff stop correcting behavior, one former administration official explained, it's often because they believe correction no longer works. A question of fitness, not ideology. Importantly, this moment transcended partisan debate. The criticism was not centered on Trump's policies, his legislative agenda, or his electoral strategy. It focused on temperament. Fitness for office, constitutional scholars argue, is not solely about legal eligibility. It encompasses emotional regulation, situational awareness, and the capacity to rise above personal grievance, especially during moments of national sensitivity. Trump's defenders counter that emotional bluntness is part of his authenticity. But critics argue authenticity is not an excuse for irresponsibility. Authenticity without restraint, one analyst noted, can become recklessness. The role of age and time. Michael Wolff's warning resonated precisely because it framed the issue as ongoing rather than episodic. His assertion that we have 3 years to go underscored a deeper anxiety, that this behavior may not stabilize, but intensify. Aging experts caution against simplistic conclusions, but they also acknowledge that cognitive stress can amplify existing personality traits. In Trump's case, those traits include fixation, grievance, and impulsive reaction. The fear among critics is not sudden collapse, but gradual erosion. What this means going forward. Looking ahead, political strategists say moments like this will increasingly shape campaign messaging, whether explicitly or implicitly. Opponents are unlikely to focus on the specific comment itself. Instead, they will frame it as evidence within a larger pattern. Every future incident will be measured against this one. Every reaction will be interpreted through this lens. Every silence will be noticed. And perhaps most importantly, every crisis will prompt the same question: is this the response people want from the highest office in the country? A final, unsettling question. The deaths of Rob Reiner and his wife remain a human tragedy, separate from politics, separate from rhetoric. No analysis can or should conflate the two. Yet Trump's response transformed a moment of mourning into a moment of reckoning. Not because it changed minds overnight. Not because it triggered immediate consequences. But because it revealed something many feared, and some hoped was no longer true. That restraint is no longer the default. That impulse now leads. And that the distance between thought and speech is narrowing. As the political cycle continues, voters will not just ask what Trump promises to do. They will ask something far more basic. What will he say next, and who will be hurt by it?